Hi everyone, it's Alice and today we are doing an autumn TBR. Now, I always overestimate how much I'm going to be able to read when it's fall, in part because the season always ends up being a little bit busier than I imagine it's going to be, and in part because I make more videos this time of year and that takes quite a lot of time, but you know, we're aiming high and we'll see where we land. I've actually made a TBR already, all about like dark academia books I would like to read, so feel free to check that out if you want to. But I still have a big stack of books here, so let's just go through them. We're starting with a book by one of my favorite authors, and what's funny about this is that I could have sworn that I had read this book, but I haven't. It's The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman, and I thought that I'd read all of the books in this series. Like, I'm pretty sure I've even said that, so oops. But I'm glad I realized because it means I have another book in the series to read, which I'm really excited about because I've loved all of the other books. This is a part of the Practical Magic series, and I'm pretty sure this one is set after Practical Magic, and then I've read Practical Magic and then two that are set before then. And if you don't know, this series follows the Owens women in different generations, and they're all cursed in matters of love. And I think in this one, we meet some of the characters that we meet in Practical Magic, but just later in life. And I think that this is, like, the book is about the end of the curse, which I think is going to be really interesting because I think I read that book last year. All of these books are named almost the same, so I can't remember which one it is. But my favorite one is the one that is all about the start of the curse. So I'm interested to see how the curse ends. And I mean, it's kind of like a happy accident that I hadn't read this one, and now I'm super excited to read it. And I just love Alice Hoffman's writing. She's such a good storyteller, and I'm sure this is just going to be magical. Secondly, we have this little book, which I have actually already sneakily started. And by the time you see this, I will have probably finished it because it's quite short. It's Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. And this obviously looks perfect for spooky season. And I actually love this cover. It's kind of creepy, but I really like it. This one is set during the course of one night, I think, in October, and it follows five strangers who every night they sort of run into each other in this graveyard. And I don't really know how or why, but one evening they find a freshly dug grave where there shouldn't be a grave. And I think they come across the person who has dug it and is maybe burying something there, and they end up trailing that person throughout the night or something like that. I know this has gotten very mixed reviews, but I just want to give it a go. It both looks and sounds really good. I love a good cemetery setting, so I'm very excited about that. And it just feels like a nice little read for spooky season. Then we have two books by T. Kingfisher, because of course we do. She's my fave. The first one is A House with Good Bones, which is fantasy horror, and it's about this woman who returns to her mother's house in North Carolina after her brother has told her that something seems off about their mom. And she gets there and something is definitely off. Her mother is very jumpy, and the house, like, there's something weird about the house. And there is something about her finding a jar of teeth, and I don't know how all of this is related, but it sounds very unsettling. I'm both excited and a little nervous to read this book because I don't know what the horror is going to be like. I've read quite a lot of books by this author, obviously, because I love her. And I've read one that was like on the edge of how much horror I can deal with. And I think that she can probably take it pretty far. And I don't know how far it's going to go in this, but I am intrigued to read it. I do really like Kingfisher's like humor, so I hope that there's a little bit of humor in this book as well because I feel like it alleviates some of the spooky stuff. The second one is Hemlock and Silver, and this is a new release from this author that I'm super excited about. I just feel like Kingfisher's books are perfect for fall. I like to read them all year round, but like this really feels like the season for them. And this one is a dark reimagining of the tale of Snow White, and it's all about poisons and intrigue, and it just sounds perfect. It follows a healer who is an expert in poisons and cures, and she actually regularly drinks poison in order to find new cures and maybe make herself a little bit more immune. I don't quite know. But she lives a very quiet life, and she's obsessed with like herbs and stuff like that. And then one day she's called to she's called by the king to the castle, I'm guessing, because his daughter is dying and he is at the end of his wits and he just wants someone to help. So he's thinking maybe her unorthodox methods might help. And she goes there, and it says that she's aided by a taciturn, like, guard and also a narcissistic cat. How they help her, I don't know, but she eventually makes it to the castle and she tries to help this daughter, but nothing works until she one day finds a like dark magical world inside of a mirror. They find some sort of dark realm in there, and it says that this may hold some cures to whatever is ailing this daughter, or it might kill them all. So I don't know what's in there, but it sounds intriguing. This just sounds kind of dark and very fairy tale-esque, and I'm really excited to just dive into this. And I am very curious about this cat because I feel like Kingfisher very often has like funny animal companions in her books. So far my favorites have been a chicken possessed by a demon and a very protective flock of geese. So I feel like this narcissistic cat is going to be a good time. This next book is one that I'm very excited to read because a lot of you have recommended this to me loads. It's The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. And this one is a like historical fiction horror book about vampires, which is obviously perfect for the season. I'm not entirely sure what time period this is set in, but it starts off with a young woman who is in her father's library and she comes across this old book and some old letters. And this like introduces her to a world that she could have never imagined. And I think her father was somehow involved in some of this and her mother, so she discovers some stuff about them. And I think it's all about like the story of Vlad the Impaler and or Dracula, and like maybe parts of that myth are actually real. And I'm pretty sure that this leads her on like a chase or a quest into finding out what's true and what's not, and things get kind of dark. And I think this story takes her like all over the world because she keeps digging deeper and looking for clues and trying to find out what's actually real. I think this sounds perfect for me, in part because a lot of you think it's perfect for me, and in part because I just feel like it's going to be. It really does sound like a book right up my alley, and I have heard that this gets like really dark and a little gothic maybe, which I'm very excited about. I am a little concerned about the length. It's like 700 pages, which I'm a little scared of, but I feel like it's gonna be worth it. And yeah, I'm very excited about this whole story and like where it's gonna take our main character. Then we have more horror with My Darling Dreadful Thing by Johanna van Veen. And this one is about this woman who has a spirit companion that only she can see. And it seems like this spirit companion is kind of all she has in life. She seems very lost and lonely. But then one day she comes into contact with this young widow and they just seem to have a connection, so our main character ends up going with this widow to her estate. But then things get very weird when they get there, something is kind of off, and then someone gets murdered. I think our main character ends up being the suspect of the murder, and so she kind of has to prove her innocence. But then she also has something like romantic going on with the widow, so it sounds very complicated and like it's gonna be, yeah, complex and a little messy, maybe. I don't really know what to expect from this. I'm wondering how many supernatural elements there are in here, if it's just a spirit companion, or if our main character is crazy, maybe? I don't know, but I'm intrigued, and this is one of those books that I have a good feeling about, and I really like the title of it. Like, every time I read this title, My Darling Dreadful Thing, it just makes me want to read it. Next, we have a couple of witchy books, and both of these seem to be on the lighter side of things, and I just need to read those books every once in a while because I can't read like super dark books all of the time, even though I really like them. So I have this one. This is the Ex Hex by Erin Sterling, and this one is about a woman who one day she like curses her ex and thinks really nothing of it. I don't think she thinks it's gonna do anything. But then years later, this curse comes back to haunt her and her town. And there is something, like there is mention of this like descendant of one of the ancient families in this town, so maybe that's the ex, but that person gets involved somehow. And things seem to go like really out of hand, and this whole town is just like a mess. And it mentions that there are murderous, wind up toys, an outraged ghost, and a surprisingly talkative cat. And that sounds like it's a little chaotic, but I think it's gonna be fun. I think the main character and this guy end up sort of teaming up to break the curse, and there is a little bit of romance in here, so I'm guessing that's where the romance comes in. And I just think this could be like a good time. And again, I love a good like animal side character and a talking cat. Like, I think that's gonna be great. I hope it's kind of like the talking cat in Sabrina, you know, Salem. He's like my dream is to have like a cat like that. Obviously, it's not possible to have a talking cat, but I hope that that's what the cat is like, because every time anyone mentions a cat that can talk, all I can think about is Salem. The other one is a sequel to a book that I read last fall. It's From Bad to Cursed by Lana Harper, and this is the follow-up to Payback's a Witch. And even though that book isn't perfect, I had a really good time reading that book. It was just like a break from everything else, and I'm hoping that this will be the same. I don't think this follows the same characters as the first book, but it's set in the same town, and that town has a very autumnal vibe, which I'm so into. And I think this follows a witch who is a demon summoner, which, like, you go, girl. That sounds really cool. And I think her and her family are accused of like sabotaging a town festival, and maybe the main character wants to prove them wrong or something else is going on. Somehow also there's another guy who gets involved, and these books are like paranormal romance, so I'm guessing there's going to be something there. Maybe a little bit of steam, who knows. Whatever it is, I think it's going to be good. It mentions on the back here, sexy evil sorceress vibe, and that's the main character. Yeah, I think that's gonna be fun. I think both of these books are just gonna be like very entertaining, and I do love any book with like witches and witchy vibes. And even though I'm not a huge romance person, I have enjoyed some like paranormal romance before, especially when it's like this. So I think this is just gonna be a good time. Then we have a fantasy book set in a library of magical books, which obviously sounds amazing. It's Ink Blood Sister Scribe, and in this one we meet this family who has guarded this library of ancient and rare magical books for generations, and the characters that we're following I think are half sisters, and they've sort of drifted apart throughout the years, but they have to come back together when their father dies after having read a book that none of them have seen before. And I think that they take over the family legacy and they take up their places as like the guardians of this library. And when they do that, they realize that like this whole world is much more dangerous and dark than they thought it was. I mean, it doesn't really get much better than that. I'm so excited to see this library. And apparently this magical world is like much bigger than any of the sisters thought. And it says that it like spans continents. And I'm just very curious about how all of this works. I'm also curious about what happened to their father, and yeah, I just think the premise sounds excellent. Next, we have a witchy retelling of Jane Eyre. It's Salt and Broom by Sharon Lynn Fisher, and I love both witches and Jane Eyre, so I feel like this is going to be very interesting to read. It says it starts off with Jane, and she is like a healer, I think, in this version, and she sets off one October morning because she has been summoned by Rochester, who has sort of summoned her as a last resort because he needs her help with something. I'm not sure like what he needs help with, but she sets off with like potions and cures, so I'm guessing maybe someone is sick. Maybe Rochester is sick? I don't know, but he summons her and she goes. When she gets there though, it seems like there's something a little off about the house. The house seems to like actively work against her, and then things also get a little bit complicated because Jane is very fascinated by Rochester, and that makes things a little complicated. And I don't know, it just sounds intriguing. I love Jane Eyre. It's one of my favorite classics, and I don't think I've read any retellings of that story. And again, I just love witches and magic, and I'm wondering like what the house is doing and how close it is to the original. I don't know, but I think it's gonna be good. I think it's a book that I would want to read even if it wasn't a Jane Eyre retelling, so I think it's gonna be a really good read. We have more historical fiction with this next one. It's The Impossible Girl by Lydia Kang, and this is set in Manhattan in 1950, and we follow a woman who was born out of wedlock, and one of her parents is like a wealthy socialite and the other is a nameless immigrant, and because of that she can sort of she's of two worlds and she can travel in both worlds, both high society and lower society. And she happens to be a resurrectionist and the only female resurrectionist in the city. And her niche is like procuring bodies with weird anomalies. And that sounds very interesting. She's got a secret though, and it's that she herself actually has a body with an anomaly to it. She's born with two hearts, and she doesn't want anyone to know because the people who are buying bodies from her could also be interested in her body, and that like puts her in danger. And then there is a series of murders in the city, and it seems like someone is like hunting certain kinds of people and they may be after her. And that sounds obviously a little stressful, and this whole book sounds a little creepy but very intriguing. This will be my second book by this author. I've read another one by her, Opium and Absinthe, I'm pretty sure it was called, and I really liked it, and that was also historical fiction. And because of that, I think I'm really gonna like this one as well. I really like the idea of like a resurrectionist, and, like body snatching and things like that. It sounds, I mean, it is creepy, but it's interesting to read about. Then we have another book by T. Kingfisher, actually. I probably should have put this with the other ones, but whatever. This one is actually the sequel to a book that I read last year, which is called What Moves the Dead. It's What Feasts at Night, and these books follow this like retired soldier, and in this one we're following them after the ordeal of the first book, and they're going to, I think, like a hunting lodge that belongs to some friends, and they just want to relax, but then they get there and the house is a mess and things are just very weird, and it seems like there's some sort of silence that is like, I don't know, devoured this place, and it's all very weird. It's set out in the cold, dark forest, and I just think it's gonna be great. The first one I really liked. These books are quite short, but I feel like the first one did a lot in not a lot of pages, and I think this one will be the same. Ooh, it also has these end papers. Maybe there's bugs in this one? Ooh, I don't like bugs, but you know, I'll give it a go. And yeah, I really liked the first one. It was very creepy, but like deliciously creepy. So I'm hoping this will be the same. This cover is quite unsettling though, but yeah, I think it's gonna be great. I love T. Kingfisher. I just want to read all of her books. Next, we have a book that I've been meaning to read forever. It's The Shining by Stephen King, and I just really need to get around to reading this book. I'm just worried that this is gonna scare me a lot, but I also just want to read it and see what it's like. I'm sure we all know at this point, but if you don't, this follows like a man who takes up a position as a caretaker for this fancy hotel during like the off season, and he takes that job because it will allow him to focus on his family, and also I think he's a writer. And then like it seems pretty idyllic, but then winter sets in and this hotel starts feeling very remote and weird things start happening. I actually haven't seen the movie for this because again, I'm scared. So this will, I mean, it's one of those books that you just sort of pick up on what happens in it or like the movie throughout your life because it's so famous, but I've never seen the full movie and I don't know like the full story. But I just really need to read this one. I feel like it can't be that scary, but then you never know with Stephen King, I feel. Second to last, we have another, what I'm guessing is a vampire book. It's The Deathless Girls by Kiran Millwood Hargrave. And this one is like a retelling of Dracula or a reimagining, and it focuses on Dracula's wives. And I think we're following these two they're either sisters or twins, and I think they end up getting kidnapped and forced to work in the castle of who I'm guessing is Dracula, and that's not a great place to end up. I like the idea of these sisters being at the center of the story, and it says it's a story about sisterhood and survival, and I don't know. I think it's gonna be good. This cover is kind of autumnal as well. It has like some autumnal leaves. And I have, I think, one or two other books by this author on my shelves. I've been meaning to read something by her for ages, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And I think maybe I'll start with this one and see what I think. I don't really know what to expect. There's also a polar bear on here, and I'm wondering if that has something to do with the story or if it's just for decoration. But yeah, I just feel like this must be perfect for autumn. Like, it just must be. It also actually, this isn't really relevant to the story, but it has like some illustrations at the beginnings of the chapters, and I think they're different for each chapter. It's not important, but it makes the book a little bit more beautiful. Lastly, we have The Specimen by Mairi Kidd, which just looks really good. It's set in Edinburgh in 1828, and I love Edinburgh as a setting, especially when it's historical fiction. It's just so atmospheric. We follow two women in here. One is quite wealthy and the other is poor, but they are both living lives with their lovers, it says. And I don't know if I'm fully grasping this, but I think that there is a string of murders in the city, and both women are faced with the same choice, which is to either keep their heads down or come forward with what they know. I don't know what they know. I don't know how this relates to the murders. I have no idea, but I think the premise of that just sounds very interesting. And again, like the historical setting, anything set in this city and it's like historical, I just want to read, and I just kind of want to go into this not knowing much. It says on the front here, it's powerful and dark, and that sounds pretty intriguing. I wonder why there's a heart on the cover, if that's related to the story or not, but yeah, I just have a good feeling about this one. Whether or not I'm going to get to all of these books over the next couple of months, we'll see. Probably not. Knowing myself, I will get distracted by other books, but yeah, for now, these are the books that I'm like most intrigued by. I'd love to know if any of you have read any of these and what you thought, and like if you really liked it, maybe I'll prioritize it. And I'd also love to know what books are on your autumn TBR and what you're most excited to read over the next couple of weeks or months. That was kind of it for today. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!